How's it going, everyone? Liam here, and we got another couple of builds for this month. But before I get into them, I just wanted to let you guys know about a couple of changes for this month. Nothing major. I'm going to be using PC Part Picker for all of these builds from now on. Just makes things a little bit easier as far as me being able to show you guys exactly what I've built rather than me just verbalizing it to you. So I'm going to leave a link for my PC Part Picker builds down in the description so you can check them out. And that way I don't have to do what I was doing before, which is like leaving links to a bunch of NCIX products. Nothing wrong with NCIX, just this is easier for me to get everything together for you. So yeah, that's about the only change. Prices, everything is still in Canadian dollars. I'm here in Canada, so that hasn't changed. But just so you guys know, from now on, that's where I'll be getting all of these parts from. So for this month, I was asked by a couple of people, and I saw a comment down there too, about maybe doing a more budget-oriented build. I did do one, I think it was a couple months ago in February, but hey, I'll do another one, that's no worries. So what I wanted to do for this month was a emulator build. So get a entry-level PC that's meant specifically for running all your emulators, like your NES, SNES, whatever you're into, Saturn, Genesis, N64. I don't judge, man. Play whatever you want. We're all gamers. So that's what this build is going to be for, and then I have another one that's more oriented towards playing all the latest titles and all the new games, but still very budget-oriented and budget-conscious. So without further ado, let's get into it. So for this build, I'm going to do the emulator build first. The case I went with was the Antec P70. The reason for that is Antec has a great reputation for making cases. I've used a couple of those over the years myself. And, you know, this one's got an all-black design. It looks quite nice. But my big reason for going with this case was the USB layout. One USB 3 on the front and two USB 2. So when you have your friends over, you actually have some room to plug in controllers. You're not having to reach in behind your build every time you want to, you know, plug in some new controllers or whatever you got to do. There's actually some expansion on the front there. Next up, don't mind me, sorry, I'm just drinking coffee. Next up, power supply. I went with a Corsair CX430M. So that's a semi-modular 430 watt 80 plus bronze power supply. Went with it, I mean, one, it was on sale, but two, the semi-modular thing, you don't have to use the cables you don't want to, which is very nice, especially if it's your first time building a computer. The less cables you have in there, it'd be easier for you to manage, so I figured that was a win-win. For storage, there's, you know, in a budget build, there's always the argument between either capacity or speed. In this case, I went with speed because if you're doing an emulator computer like this one is meant for, your games probably aren't taking up too much room anyway. So I went with an ADATA Premiere, that's the SP550, in 240 gig flavor. So that should give you a decent amount of room for expansion. You can install all your games, everything you need, and not really have to worry too much about running out of room too fast. Excuse me. For a processor, I actually went the AMD route. I grabbed an APU simply because we don't need a whole lot of graphical or CPU horsepower in order to play a lot of the things this computer will be playing, and this gives us both of what we need in one package. So I went with the A10 7860K from AMD. A couple of reasons. One being it's one of their quad-core parts, which is nice. Turbo is up to 4 gigs, so it's actually pretty fast. Comes with 8 GCN cores, that's graphics core next, so 512 stream processors, and they run at 757 megahertz. So it's actually got a lot of graphics horsepower in it as well, considering what it is. Another big reason why I went with this is because AMD has recently updated their stock coolers. So this proc actually comes with one of their newer updated coolers, so it should run a little cooler, a little quieter, which is very nice. You know, you don't want to have here in the vacuum cleaner, aka your computer, when you're trying to play games. So that's going to help prevent that. For a motherboard, pretty standard budget board. I went with an MSI A78M E35 V2. Now this is a pretty cut down board. It gives you everything you need, nothing that you don't. So I'll give you a quick run over everything on it. There's only 2 RAM slots, which is kind of unfortunate, I know, but you know, that should be all you need really anyway. Two DIMM slots for this should be fine. You got your 6 SATA 6 ports, so lots of room for hard drives, all that sort of thing, which is nice. There's a USB 3 header on here, which might not sound fancy, but some of the cheaper boards still don't have them, so that's definitely noteworthy. And last but not least, on the back, so we have standard audio connections, Ethernet port, a PS2 for your mouse and keyboard, 2 USB 3, 4 USB 2, and then there's a VGA, a DVI, and an HDMI, which was the big thing. I wanted to be able to have all three of those because if you're using the APU, all your graphics is, like I said, coming from your processor. You're not actually using a dedicated video card. So the VGA, DVI, and HDMI, those are all your outs and ins, or not ins, but those are all your outs for video. So that way you can plug it into your TV, pretty much any monitor you want. The only thing you're missing is DisplayPort, but if you're using this for an emulator build, chances are you're not too worried about DisplayPort anyway. So yeah, that is our board. And what else did I forget? Oh yeah, RAM. RAM's probably good to have. I went with some Munchkin Blackline 8GB kit. It's 2133, and I believe it's CL10. Yeah. So that is nice because it's nice speedy memory, and in case you don't know, with an APU, because the graphics is actually built into the processor, all of the bandwidth for the graphics is coming from your RAM. So you want the fastest RAM that you can possibly get for an APU build. That's where your graphics performance is going to come from. So that wraps up the emulator build. I didn't include an OS in this. I'm going to go ahead and recommend probably Linux for this. If you're a little bit more inclined, you could go and grab something like either Ubuntu or Fedora, even Linux Mint if you like. There's lots of options. Those would probably be my 3 recommended ones, but hey, I mean, you can do whatever the heck you like. If not, you can grab a copy of Windows. There's lots of places online you can find Windows for relatively inexpensive, like OEM copies perhaps, or you know, whatever, what have you. Place that I like to go is called kingwin.com. I'll leave a link to them in the description. You can check them out. But not including our operating system costs, we are at $476 and some change. So that's not too bad. So we're under 500 bucks, and this is going to be able to do any sort of emulation you want. All you're going to have to do is grab a couple controllers, and away you go. So that does it for the emulator build. Next up, I have, I called it an entry-level gaming build, but it's actually quite capable. There's actually a lot you'd be able to do with this build. So I do like the other one. I'll start with the case. I went with a Corsair Carbide 200R. I own a Corsair case myself, and I know several of my friends do as well. They make awesome cases. They look nice as well, but this one was on sale, which of course didn't hurt. But the big thing that I liked about this case is some of the cheaper cases still don't have this either, believe it or not, but it's all black on the inside, which I really like, so that's why we went with that. Now, for a power supply, I was going to go with the CX430M that I did in the last build again, but I wanted to give us a little bit more breathing room as far as power, not because 430 watts isn't enough, but with a little bit more power now, you can upgrade something in this later without really worrying about that too much. So I went with an EVGA, it's the 500B, so it's a 500 watt power supply. It's still 80 plus bronze. The sacrifice we made here is that it is not semi-modular. So it is about the same price as the Corsair that's semi-modular, but it's 70 watts more. So that's why I went with that. With 500 watts, you can throw almost anything you want in here for either a new CPU or a new graphics card down the line and not have power be a concern. So that is good. What we'll do next? I guess we'll do... we'll do the processor next. So for the processor, I struggled on this one a little bit. I wanted to squeeze an i5 in here, but it's just not going to happen. So I went with the Intel Core i3 6100. It's a Skylake chip, so it's one of the newer ones, which is awesome. And the reason that specifically I wanted an i5, but an i3 will work, is because it's something like a Pentium or a Celeron, anything like that, that's specifically 2 cores and not 4 threads. A lot of the, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but there are games that are coming out now that have 0 support for dual-core processors. I know Far Cry 4 was one of them, Dragon Age Inquisition, and, you know, a lot of other games are just struggling with dual cores in general. I know I have a Pentium here that we were trying to play Just Cause 3 on, and it runs, but barely. So at least this way you have 4 threads. You'll be able to play anything you want and not really worry too much. And it's a 3.7 gig chip, so it's actually pretty speedy, which is definitely nice. For our motherboard, we went with the Gigabyte H170M DS3H. Awesome naming scheme, Gigabyte. Still a very, very nice budget-oriented board. Nothing too fancy. Again, basically, you know, everything you need, nothing that you don't. I'll start off with the rear I/O. So we have your basic audio connections. You got your Ethernet port. You got 4 USB 3, 2 USB 2. a PS2 combo, so only one of them, and then VGA, DVI, and HDMI, but we're not going to be using any of those anyway, so not too worried. My big thing was getting some 4 USB 3 ports, because USB 3s are just better. They're nice to have. Other than that, the only other really noteworthy things of this, there is an M.2 slot, so you can add an SSD to this in that form factor if you ever want to, which is very nice. And it is supporting of, you know, the NVMe, all the new drives. So you can throw pretty much anything you want in there. You can grab like a Samsung 950 and, you know, be blazing through everything, which is awesome. There is also SATA Express connectors on here, but I haven't seen anything SATA Express yet. If it ever comes to market, then you can use it, but I haven't seen anything, and it's been almost 2 years, so I wouldn't hold your breath. So that is our board. What else we got left? I guess. Oh, and there is 4 DIMM slots for RAM on this board, which is nice. That gives you room for expansion, which is always good. Speaking of RAM, I went with, for this build, a set of G.Skill Ripjaws RAM, DDR4 to go with our Skylake proc, running at 2133 megahertz, which is very nice. It's just a 4 gig kit, so 8 gigs total. Nothing too fancy, but it'll get the job done. For storage, as I always say, it's always the battle between speed and capacity. I again chose speed on this one. I went with the exact same SSD. That's the ADATA SP550 in 240 gig flavor, just because it's you know, a good performing drive for a good price. You can't go wrong. If you don't want to go that route, you know, you can always grab a Seagate Barracuda or a Western Digital 1 terabyte blue, something like that, for about the same price. Then you can get the capacity, but again, that's up to you guys. Last but certainly not least, the foundation of any half-decent gaming rig, excuse me, we have the graphics card. With this one, I went with an EVGA GTX 950, the Super Clocked Edition. Couple of reasons. One being that it has their nice ACX 2.0 cooler on it, so you got 2 nice big fans, help keep everything cool, keep everything quiet, which is the main thing. And there's actually a really nice hefty overclock on this card in particular. The standard for a GTX 950 is 1024 megahertz on the core, but EVGA has that cranked all the way up to 1190. So that's out of the box. You can go even further than that, but there's a nice big overclock on it right out of the gate, which I like. Get free extra performance, can't really go wrong there. But the big thing with this card is, even though it's around $200, it's a relatively cheap video card. You're going to get a lot of performance out of it. You're going to be playing stuff like maybe Grand Theft Auto 5 on high settings. Maybe not maxed, but, you know, high settings. You'll be able to do Crysis 3, Metro Last Light, games like that. Again, you're not going to be maxing them, but you're not playing them on low either. I'm talking high settings, you know, maybe medium on some textures here and there, because there's only 2 gigs of VRAM, but, you know, there's going to be really good performance coming out of this card. And if you're somebody who's not super worried about, you know, cranking up all the settings on your games, you just want to play them, well, then even better news, because this will last you years. I mean, this is already playing a lot of titles that are out today. Even Witcher 3 you could play on relatively decent settings without having to worry. So, you know, this computer would be able to last you years, and coming in at $697, that's pretty darn good. Again, I did not include an OS on this. I probably would go for the Windows, in this case, but like I said, I'll leave a link to a place called kingwin.com down in the description, because, you know, you can get copies of Windows for way less than you might find in other locations. So that's why it's not included in here, but I'll leave a link down in the description. You're only really looking at like $30 for a copy anyway, so it doesn't add a whole lot. But for $700, you're going to be able to play all the games you want. You're going to be able to actually turn some settings up and not really make a whole lot of compromises. And there's room to grow here. The 170 platform is still relatively new. It's going to be supported, I'm assuming, in the new Kaby Lake processors. So in a couple of years, if you wanted to maybe grab one of those and slap an i5 or an i7 in here, you can actually do that, and there is, you know, room to go. We have a 500 watt power supply, so if you wanted to replace this 950 with some next gen card, and again in a couple of years or something, you could even go for something higher end than a 50 series and still do that, not worry. And that's what this computer is all about. It's giving you room to grow while still being able to play games, of course. But I've rambled on for probably way too long. I have no idea how long I'm running right now, but anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you guys like watching these videos. I know I like making them. Leave a comment down below if you know, like what I'm doing here. If there's anything you want to see me do, something different. I got a couple of ideas for some other videos other than just doing these monthly build guides. I do really like doing these, but I'd like to branch out and do some different stuff. But anyway, that'll be coming down the pipeline. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.